Journalism of the type we do is very expensive, and I mean very expensive. It takes a lot of money to put out this magazine. I think that the reader can see a healthy magazine in that it's quite fat. You want something with just a little bit of emotional or tabloidy, scandalous baggage. I'm telling you to loosen up my buttons, baby, but you keep frontin', saying what you gonna do to me, but I ain't seen nothing.
Vanity Fair has been labeled the smartest glossy in the world. Is that a good way to describe it?
Well, it is glossy. I think that it is an unusual sort of glossy monthly in that it combines both sides of the brain in the editing process. So you have the things that the enjoyable, the fun things people talk about, say at a dinner party, and you have the serious things that they talk about at the same time.
Is that how you would describe the magazine?
It is. I think that we don't do demographic surveys or anything like that, but I do think it does combine sort of the high-low of the culture and the sort of serious and non-serious aspects in an engaging way, and at least we attempt to.
Your publisher, Mr. Newhouse, he said that it's a strange animal. It's both popular and yet appealing to a very cultivated audience. Is that a complex thing to make?
Well, the history of Vanity Fair is that it was started in the teens by Condé Nast, who was the publisher then, and Frank Crowninshield, and they wanted a magazine that sort of ended the Victorian age and the Edwardian age and sort of ushered in the Jazz age in the 20s, and it was hugely successful and very much the magazine of the smart set of what people were talking about in the cafes and the drawing rooms around the city. The current Vanity Fair, which was started in 1983 by Mr. Newhouse, he basically wanted a New Yorker with pictures. And to a certain extent, that is what it is, at the same time reflecting more of what contemporary popular culture is about.
Who do you edit Vanity Fair for?
I edit for somebody like me, or somebody who's going to get on an airplane for the next 8 hours, and you want to make sure they're taken care of by the magazine. I mean, in general, we sort of edit for the world's sort of cultural and sort of intelligentsia.
So it's very much your magazine.
Yes, since we don't do studies, if it interests me, I put it in the magazine. I sort of have a rule that if I sit down to, I usually edit at my kitchen table late at night when my kids used to be doing homework. And if it put a manuscript down 2 or 3 times, not a very good sign. And I felt, I'm getting paid for this. So if it feels like homework to me, it's really going to feel like homework to the readers. So that it is about big, serious subjects told well, because I think that you can run, and we do run, stories that run over 25,000 words. But if a story like that is in the hands of a great storyteller, he can make 25,000 words go by like that. A magazine article that's not well written can seem to drag after 300 words. So, I mean, I would argue that the future of a magazine like Vanity Fair is that it in order to survive and to thrive in a world of weeklies and dailies and the internet, that a magazine like Vanity Fair has to tell stories and tell them well and bring great photographs to the table at the same time.
So when you put it down 2 and 3 times, that's when you pay your famous killing fees.
I don't pay kill fees. I pay for everything. If a writer turns a story in, he gets paid full freight. But if it takes 3 times to read it, or if it sits around for two days or more, it's not a good sign. I want it to feel the same way a reader will, that I can hardly wait to get it in my hands and to go through it.
What triggers your readers? What kind of stories?
Well, you know, I've watched in sort of country houses when if you're there for the weekend and you bring a new issue, and that there's two ways of looking at Vanity Fair. The first is to flip through the magazine, either forward or backwards, to see the photographs, because it is one of the few magazines where most of the pictures you see in there are new. And I do think photography has still a huge impact, even this sort of video internet world. And then the second, that's also just to sort of see for yourself, the reader themselves, what's coming up, what they're going to see later on in the issue. And then the second is to sit down and read the story in one sitting or two, or the issue in one sitting or two sittings or three sittings.
What makes them angry?
I think anything about that where a magazine is not true to itself, if it makes readers angry, if it is if it curries too much favor with an advertiser, I think they can get angry over that. I know when in the early days when we wrote about it, and me especially, and negatively about the Bush administration, the Mail ran about 2 to 1 against me. Mm-hmm. Then by about 2004, it was 1 to 1 against me. And then by now, it's like 3 to 1 for me.
Because they got used to your tone.
Yeah, they got used to my tone, and it's one of the few times in my entire life I was correct about something.
But you're really after the president.
Well, I think that I think that if you don't know the half of it, chances are you don't know the 10th of it. I have a feeling that there'll be so many things coming out over the next 2 or 3 years. We'll be shocked at how bad the situation actually is.
But you really turned your editor's word into a political platform.
Well, I think that, by and large, a journalist should maintain a degree of sort of equilibrium when you're talking about a story, and have the ability to look at both sides. But at some point, that becomes it tips over into some other balance. The Vanity magazine was very tough on the Clinton administration. Now, the Clintons, they do not love Vanity Fair in the least. So it's part of a magazine's job to be tough on administration and be sort of a watchdog. But with this administration, it was very hard to see what the other side is when they're talking about a needless war or torture or a devastated economy. That it's like just because you are doing a story or that the fact is the Earth is round, it doesn't mean necessarily you have to have somebody coming out, also quoted in the story, saying that the Earth is flat.
But are there limitations to how political you can become?
Yeah, the readers will tell you, and your own sort of self-trigger will tell you if you go overboard. As long as it's marshaled by facts, I think that it is more than acceptable in a time like this.
What is the core content of Vanity Fair?
The core content is basically it's the things that people are interested in, whether there's the lives of great lives of people who have died. It is the big political story of the day. I do think we have a unique problem with Vanity Fair in America and around the world, is that most of the competition is weekly or daily or hourly on the internet. So it is. We have to do stories that can get ahead of the news, like when we did the Deep Throat story. Mm-hmm. And figured out who Deep Throat was in the Watergate scandal.
Tell us how you did that.
Well, it took about 2.5 years, and a man contacted me and said, I represent a man who says that he is the Deep Throat that Bob Woodward quoted regularly in All the President's Men. And
what was your initial reaction to that?
My initial reaction was, well, I know Woodward and Carl Bernstein is on the masthead of the magazine. So my initial reaction was I could call them to see if there's anywhere near truth about this. And because I always thought there was no Deep Throat. I thought it was a literary conceit that Woodward and their editor, Alice May, would come up with. So I turned it over to one of our editors. And over the next 2.5 years, with long periods where there was inactivity, we gradually narrowed down to the facts on all of this. And man was Mark Feld. He was in his 80s. He was in a sort of an advanced stage of Alzheimer's. And again, I could have called Carl or Bob, but they would have rushed the story into the Washington Post. Mm-hmm. So I went on my honeymoon 2 years ago. It was in May 22nd. I left. We'd closed the story, but we didn't have 100% confirmation that was Woodward or that was Deep Throat. I'm coming back on my honeymoon. I'm down in the Caribbean, and I talked to the editor, David Friend, who had been working on the story, And he said, we released the story to the news today. I just went, oh my God, because I completely forgot during my honeymoon, which was a good sign for the honeymoon.
Good sign for the marriage.
And so we through the entire day, we had to wait to see if Woodward or Bernstein, what they would say. At first they denied it, the Washington Post denied it, then they said that they would make an announcement at 4:45. Now I was getting on a plane at 5 o'clock, and I thought, if we get this wrong, it'll be a long flight back to New York City. So just before I got on the airplane, David Friend called me and said, Woodward and Bernstein just announced that Mark Felt is indeed Deep Throat. Now, as it turns out, we've been working on a similar story for a year that's gone back and forth. It's gone to 3 countries and 2 continents, and there's thousands of miles of air travel. So we're involved in something else that it seems a lot less likely, but will still involve a great story. So these things can take
But how
years.
could you keep it secret for so long? I mean, you are a monthly magazine. It must be
well,
difficult to
we
break
closed it in a different way, and we had only 5 people knew about it for most of the period of the issue, and then we brought in 7 people, and most people at Vanity Fair that we work with, we've all worked together for between roughly around 15 years.
But still, so you released the news before you came out with the magazine,
right? We released it to the press worldwide, and because if we let the magazine, it would sit around in the plant for a couple of days, then it would sit around in the newsstand. So we wanted to control the release of it, and so that's the one thing with the monthly magazine, is that you have to release the magazine, the news, even while you don't have copies on the newsstand.
What's most important for you, the scoop on Deep Throat, or the first interview with Jennifer Aniston after she divorced from Brad Pitt?
Well, sort of neither and both in a strange way. I think that the strength of a magazine like Vanity Fair is in the totalness of a year's worth of journalism rather than any given story. And but those things and sort of major stories that we've done on Iraq. We've one recently on the $8 billion in cash that has gone missing in Iraq. That these are stories that I take great pride in, and it's the accumulation of all these stories that make a year of Vanity Fair work.
Photography is obviously important. Wherever you walk here, you see the pictures on the wall, like here behind you and upstairs. And what does photography mean to Vanity Fair?
Well, if you go back to the history of Vanity Fair, the photographers that worked in the old one, you had people like Man Ray and Harel, you had Cecil Beaton, Cartier-Bresson, and Steichen and Steiglitz. And what Vanity Fair did was that it created essentially modern portrait photography, and the magazine continues to do that. It's a very important part of who we are. And I think photography is in its own way has as great a strength now as it did 50 years ago. If you think about the war in Iraq, the single most indelible image of that war will be a photograph taken with a cell phone or whatever it was taken with, but of the hooded prisoner with the electrodes in Abu Ghraib. So photography is still hugely important. And it sort of slows down and synthesizes a world or a person or a subject or an environment to great effect.
What are you looking for in the photographies?
Well, in certain pictures you look for a great splash. In others you look for something that goes, this is something that Annie Leibovitz is particularly good at, something that goes deep into the soul of the person. And a person will put on a front when a photographer comes in to see them, and they'll be sucking their stomach in and holding their chin out. And she wears them down just by not being afraid to stay open for a long time. So at some point, the person, they let most of their guard down, and then she'll get a shot that is different than the shot she might have taken the first time around, in the first roll of film.
You have the Swedish photographer Jonas Carlson on your list. What made you sign him?
Well, Jonas Carlson is an extraordinary photographer, and we'd known him by reputation. And Jonas is a very similar photographer to Annie in that he takes pictures that are painterly. Many of them are composed like a painting, He lights beautifully, which is a big key in photography. And it's his, he's got this a very sort of warm, affable personality. So I think he can get people to do things that perhaps other photographers can't. And I've used him particularly in sort of major stories like after September 11th, he and one of our photo producers, Rob Biner, went down and spent 3 weeks at Ground Zero taking pictures of firemen and nurses. And it was a very moving, emotional portfolio that they did. And then I sent them down after the hurricane after Hurricane Katrina, sent them down to New Orleans right after the hurricane had devastated the city, and they did a similar type of portfolio. But he is sort of kind of the Swedish Annie Leibovitz.
Mm-hmm. How important is controversy to your pictures?
Well, controversy is very important because what it does, it expands by exponentially the reach of the potential readers or buyers of the magazine. So you don't want everything to go smoothly in a given month. You want some people to kick up a fuss about more than one of your stories.
So like when you had Mike Myers pictured as a Hindu deity and you had to apologize for it, it was actually good.
Actually, I don't remember that. Do you remember this?
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember. Did we actually apologize?
I don't think we apologized.
I don't think we did. But
No,
I
don't remember it.
That's what I read. Anyway, so we
we may have said something. I remember it was not very big then.
Yeah,
Okay.
that wasn't a big one.
So tell me then, what kind of picture controversy do you remember?
I do remember in the heat of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, we managed to get Monica Lewinsky to pose, and for Herb Ritz, one of the great photographers at the time, for 4 very sort of either salacious or outrageous pictures, one of which was...
What is salacious? Give me a synonym for that.
Sort of not wearing enough clothing, and then one in which she was wearing something skimpy and holding an American, and sort of draping herself in the American flag. Now, I feel sorry for this woman because her life was ruined and Bill Clinton's life has gone on to ever greater heights. So it is, that obviously has some controversy. And this all adds together for the myth of the magazine. But even when, like Tom Cruise, the pictures of Tom Cruise's baby, I mean, that was a huge thing for the magazine, even though it's not the most important thing in the world or anything, but it's a great part of what Vanity Fair can do and what Vanity Fair is.
Yeah, that was the most wanted baby in the celebrity universe, one could say.
Well, if you want to, and if there is something like that, I try to go after almost everything.
How did you, of course, and how did you get him?
We just passed it away. First, we had a reasonably good relationship with Tom, didn't know his wife very well, and Jane Sarkin, who's the features editor, she came to me one day and said, why don't we try to go after the baby? I said, sure, let's do it. And so she worked on it for 2 months and got it.
So I thought maybe Annie Leibovitz was your best argument.
She can be an argument with some people. I mean, not to give too much away, but often in, say, criminal cases, when we're trying to get somebody who hasn't talked to the press at all, I will often say, we'll need a photograph of the lawyer, of course. And that way the lawyer sort of realizes, I could be in Vanity Fair and photographed by Annie Leibovitz, and quite often then they'll pose with their client, and it helps sort of grease the wheels towards that. But having your picture taken by Annie or Helmut Newton in the day or Herb Ritz or Bruce Weber is a big factor.
But one gets the idea easily that it's a whole industry of agents trying to push celebrities into the magazine. How does it work actually? Well,
we have a filter system, and as soon as, strange enough, I find that as soon as I find any kind of pushing on me to put somebody in the magazine, my guard immediately goes up, and I don't think you'll ever see them in the magazine, because I think I want to choose the subjects for myself rather than have some outside force trying to convince me to do otherwise.
And when you get somebody to be there for the magazine, how does it? Is it a lot of negotiations? I mean, with the celebrities.
The celebrities?
Only that's what I mean.
I think probably it is. The arrangement is that we'll put you on, if it's a movie star for our covers, we'll put you on the cover, and you don't have to answer every question, but we may ask questions that don't make you feel particularly comfortable.
And how much do you involve yourself to try to get these people to?
Almost not at all, other than in the idea of who we would have on the cover. Beyond that, I would never make any phone calls or anything.
What are you looking for in a celebrity story?
You look. It's funny that people have had perfectly great lives don't necessarily do well on the covers of magazines. Like Tom Hanks has got a wonderful life. He's got a lovely marriage. He's got lovely kids. He makes great movies. Makes lots of money. He's kept his hair. And that doesn't necessarily mean interesting reading. You want somebody with just a little bit of emotional or sort of tabloidy, scandalous baggage. But somebody at the same time who looks like they will have value in the long term in the culture, or will be some seismic sort of burnout in the culture, but one that we'll be talking about for years on end. So it's a variety of factors, but at the same time, a cover for a magazine like this, it has to reflect the culture to a certain degree, 8 months out of 12 in a given year for it to remain vital.
How much of a balance is it to cover Hollywood and at the same time be a part of the entertainment industry?
We're not really part of it, other than we throw this big dinner on the Oscars, and outside, and then we do a movie star, we do a Hollywood issue, which is usually big part of it is old Hollywood, which I find much more interesting than current Hollywood, and we might do 2 business stories a year involving Hollywood, but it's always good to be a little bit feared in an industry rather than be their friend.
Let's talk about quality journalism. What is the importance of serious journalism to your commercial success?
Well, as I say, if you are telling stories and doing them well, I think the readers will stay with you through this sort of age of constant onslaught of more news and shorter news. If you and I think that's part of it. And I think that if you are the reader of Vanity Fair, you have a Catholic interest, and the big serious pieces that are about things that should be serious, that are serious issues to you, will get their attention.
But when you hire now investigative journalists, really the best one, Pulitzer Prize winners and so on, is it an editorial risk you take that you will have too much serious journalism in your mixture?
Yes, and I think you can go overboard, so you do want to sort of measure it out and leaven that with something from the art world or from the cultural world or something from Hollywood, and so you try to get something from the social world, and you do try to have that mix of what most people are interested in.
How different is it to write for Vanity Fair compared to the New Yorker?
Probably not all that different, other than the fact that the New Yorker writers may be better at describing a physical object or subject because they don't have the photographs to fall back on. I don't think it's that different at all.
They are very heavy on fact checking. Are you as
identical? We have the identical system.
Where is it most prestigious to write?
Probably some people think the New Yorker, and some people think Vanity Fair.
What is the unique thing that Vanity Fair brings to the story that you can only find here?
Well, again, it's the notion that a magazine is words and images, and the images, if we do the job well, are as strong as the words, and if we do the job well, the words are as strong as the images.
How much do you involve yourself in the editing process?
Well, I edit everything in the magazine.
Everything you
every
go through?
Word, yes.
And you read every word of it?
Like
from
2 or 3, some stories once, some stories twice.
How many big stories never makes it into the magazine? A month, for instance.
Well, no big stories don't make it into the magazine. If stories that don't work out, if a story can be repaired through editing or rewriting, it'll go back as long as it doesn't lose its currency. But by and large, any big story makes it into the magazine.
Why did you do a special on Africa?
Not my idea. It was funny. It was completely Bono, I was contacted by Bono, who said, would you be interested in having me guest edit an issue of the magazine?
He called you up?
He called me through a mutual friend of ours, this guy, Mark Dowley, and he said, that's what he did. Bono asked him to ask me if he could edit an issue of the magazine. I said, sure, I'll be interested in talking about that. So he came in, and I sort of had an idea of what he would want to do it on. And so we settled on, and Africa was fine. And then over the course of 4 months, we put it together. And he was, didn't phone it in. He worked very hard. And
was he a good editor?
He was a very good editor. Not in, he wasn't. He was very good actually in little pencil editing suggestions, and very good on concepts at the beginning of the, and very good with queries, so asking, being curious and questioning about stories.
How did it sell?
It sold well, better than an average July issue, which usually don't sell that well because they're quite thin issues, and it may have been like in the top 5 July issues.
Why did you
ever.
do 20 different covers?
That was sort of a desperation move in a way, because I didn't know how to sell a subject as complex as Africa with one cover. So, and I'd had this idea of a cover notion of having one person telling somebody else something, then that person telling the next person
so
something.
So like Bill Gates was telling...
I forget, he was telling like Warren Buffett or...
Yeah, and George Bush. You had even your friend George Bush.
We had a very good friend George Bush. And, but it was out of desperation, and at the same time I thought it would attract attention to this by having the people on the cover be people who the readers would admire and might get them to become
Did
more
you find
active.
out which sold the best of them?
Yes.
Which one?
I can't tell you.
Were you surprised?
It would make the others feel... No, not at all. It would make the others feel so much worse about
Let me
themselves.
guess, Oprah Winfrey.
She did well.
Good. What was the impact of the issue?
You know, it may have an immediate impact, but the long-term impact is, and a magazine like this can do this. It can make, you know, the environment in our sort of green issues, and I think we were like the first major magazine ever to do one, or something like this, to make it seem sort of put in front of the agenda, and to make young people say, oh, you know, this is a great, cool thing to do.
You feel you have a mission as an editor?
No, I mean, your first inclination is to pay for your mortgage and, you know, get your kids through school, and I think
you have succeeded quite well in that.
I've done okay. I've got 4 kids, yeah, and
two wives.
And 2 wives. Thank you. Yes. And but I think that not at the same time.
Thank you.
I think that my sort of. I believe that I have one customer, and that one customer is that reader getting on an airplane for the next 8 hours.
Hollywood. What fascinates you with Hollywood?
Almost nothing right now. The only thing that fascinates me with Hollywood is the 5 good movies that come out in a given year.
But I read your foreword to the Hollywood Vanity Fair's Hollywood issue. And I feel there is a big connection.
Well, the movies, you know, it's the movies are, I mean, are so much larger than life because the people are. They're 40 feet high or whatever they are in a movie theater, and I think movies are a very important part of our culture. And but I'd find in a given year I see 10 good movies and no more.
When you say like that nothing right now, is it because you feel Hollywood right now at this point is a dull place?
Well, it is a dull place right now, and I did a documentary about 4 years ago about the last great studio head. His name was Robert Evans, and it was a documentary called "The Kid Stays in the Picture."
It was shown on Swedish television.
Oh, was it?
Yes.
Well, and Bob Evans was, you know, he was a character, and he was great looking, and he lived well, and he was proactive rather than reactive in running a studio. If you walked into most studios right now, the people look like they should be the #1 employees at hardware stores. They're completely colorless. They're accountants more than creators, and as a result, it's a very dull place.
You got prize for that documentary. How do you find the time to do documentaries on the side of your work here?
Well, I have it. First of all, I didn't direct the documentary. I produced these documentaries, and it's sort of a natural extension of what the magazine is. I mean, I've got 3 documentaries that are coming out next year, but they're sort of story-driven documentaries, any one of which could have been a story in the magazine.
How important is the Oscar issue for Vanity Fair?
Probably not as important now as it was in the beginning. It sort of it was a big sort of mark for the magazine early on in what it could do of marshaling forces around a single subject, and it's a nice part of the year, but it is, I think, the best issues of Vanity Fair are absolutely normal issues where there's no special anything, and it's 10 stories of sort of great diversity in subject matter.
But just tell us, how is the Oscar issue made? Because it's fantastic how you get all these celebrities together.
Well, let's say, for instance, in the last year, we did a sort of an entire film noir that spread over 30 pages, all shot by Annie Leibovitz. We wrote our own film noir movie, and then cast it with the people who were going to be the Oscar favorites for that year. And this year we're doing something similar to that. So we can pull in all those people in a way that I don't think any other magazine on the planet could. But then you pepper it with stories from like the 70s, of filmmakers from the 70s, and sort of some of the great lives in Hollywood and sort of studio battles. So I think the one thing we did was we recognized the romance of what Hollywood could be and what Hollywood was.
But how can you synchronize the calendar and get them in there at the same time?
Because we leave some aspects to the very last moment. I mean, most of actually that issue, we're shooting it all right now. So this is October, and it comes out in February.
And how long time does it take to produce the issue?
It takes some things you have to start in advance, just because you know, if actors are good, they're busy, and if they're busy, they're not in Los Angeles. So you have to open that window of shooting up wider than normal, because you've got to catch them when they're in town.
And then you have the high-profile Oscar party. How do you like that?
Well, I'm not a party goer by and large, and I just soon be watching the Oscars at home with my family and eating Chinese food. But now that we've done it, I've learned to be a reasonably good host, and if we're going to do it, I want to do it really well. And it's like the biggest annual party in the world now.
Almost bigger than the Oscar itself.
It's different than the Oscars themselves, but I think it's very important to the Oscars. And one of the things we did is we made it. The Oscars had gotten sort of run down a bit and a bit tattered when we started this, and I think we made it. It took maybe an outsider to make it to sort of show them that it could be a great night, and it is a great night.
Let's talk about you as the editor a little bit. You become the editor of the year several times, and got numerous awards. What's the secret behind a good editor?
Well, it can vary from magazine to magazine. I used to have a magazine called Spy that did nothing but make fun of Vanity Fair. So I've been on both sides of this fence. But I think that the overriding elements of a good or a decent editor is you have to have sort of great curiosity, great passion, and a great ability to, it's like you're a choir master. You've got all these people in the choir, and you've got to keep them singing somewhat in unison throughout a given issue. By the same token, you have to be able to balance how you feel with the needs of many diverse egos. And at Spy magazine, where it was like 2 editors and a lot of interns, it was like running Menudo. Vanity Fair is like running the Metropolitan Opera. So it's a lot of
bigger egos, that means.
Big egos. So it's a lot of that, and just learning how to handle all that.
What's the difference between the Graydon who edited Spy from the one editing Vanity Fair?
About 50 pounds, and half a head of hair. I was much younger then, and I think my partner and I, we were sort of angry young men, and I always tell people, like, I'm 58 now, and I say, if you're still angry in your 50s, you don't need a magazine, you need help. But we were sort of funny angry in those days, and I think a 58-year-old couldn't do that magazine now.
How did you become that sort of people that you actually teased at that time?
I think a lot happens with a lot of people as they get older. And I try to, the magazine is not the same magazine as the Vanity Fair we made fun of back in the day. It's probably a closer sibling in parts to what Spy wrote about. So you try not to be as ridiculous as the people you made fun of, but the chances are you do wind up in that category.
At that time you used to call Donald Trump for the long-fingered vulgarian.
Short-fingered vulgarian.
Short-fingered vulgarian. And now you go to his wedding.
I didn't go to his wedding. I was invited to his wedding.
But you did turn it down.
Yeah.
But you're friends?
Acquaintances.
Acquaintances. How important is it to build a persona as an editor?
Not important at all. I think it's important for an editor to be able to, without research studies, be able to understand who his reader is, without any research whatsoever. And so, being out and about a bit, I think it's very good for editors to get out of the house and out of the office.
How would you characterize yourself as an editor? What are your strengths and your weaknesses?
You know, I don't know that much, but I'm very decisive. And, you know, actually, in the end of the day, you know, it's a famous quote about Hollywood by William Goldman, the screenwriter, and his quote was always that nobody knows nothing. And you could say that about the magazine, but there's no rules. I mean, if there were rules and if there were like hard and fast guidelines, all magazines would be successful. But they're not. So every month is a challenge of unknown variables. There are no roadmaps of success. And if you just succeed, you know, 5% more than you fail, you're sort of doing okay.
It seems to be a trend with big-time magazine editors portrayed as devils. Do you have to be tough to survive on the job?
I don't think you have to be tough. I think you have to be fair. And I think if somebody is too tough, they won't survive on the job for a long period of time.
Now Jeff Bridge will play you as a character. How does that feel to you in Toby Young's book?
Well, I don't like the idea of having kindness repaid with a book. The book is not.
You mean Toby Young?
Yeah, it's not terrible towards me. It's the idea of repaying kindness by this. And I mean, if I had to have somebody play me, Jeff Bridges is more than fine.
Okay. How much do you, as an editor, involve yourself in the business?
Business meaning selling advertising?
No, I meant, sorry, how much do you in the business of the magazine, of Vanity Fair? I mean the business side of the magazine.
Well, I do think that it's you can maintain a division between church and state by staying on top of what's going on. So the publisher and I meet, the person who sells the advertising, we meet at least twice a week. And because I want to know what's going on, and I take great pride in that this is a very successful financial magazine.
Yeah. How important is that for you?
It's one of the measures of success, and I think that the reader can see a healthy magazine in that it's quite fat. And whereas if you're watching a television show, whether they have a lot of ads or not too many ads, you don't really notice. In fact, you don't like it when they have a lot of ads. But in magazines, it's immediately evident.
And how much is it also guaranteed for you to have your freedom as an editor?
Journalism of the type we do is very expensive, I mean very expensive, and so that it takes a lot of money to put out this magazine, and so it's very good to have a very solid business underneath it.
You've been now the editor for 15 years. How long can a successful editor stay on the top?
I don't know. I mean, I'm 58, and I think that great editors have hung around till their 70s. It depends on what your influence are. And if you're around sort of young people a lot, I mean, my kids are all between, say, 14 and 23. And so, you know, they've had an enormous effect on the magazine because so many aspects of the culture, once you've turned at every sort of decade mark, you completely shut off certain aspects of the culture. And like nobody over the age of 50 should be listening to contemporary music, but your kids do. So you sort of hear it in sort of secondhand through them, or you know what is important in their culture, what's not important. And I think that if you stay sort of curious and attached, that age has nothing to do with it.
When Mr. Newhouse wanted you to take over after legendary Tina Brown, you thought he meant the New Yorker first.
We did mean the New Yorker at first.
Well, he did mean it.
Right.
And which one would you have preferred?
Well, at the time, the New Yorker definitely, simply because for the 5 years before I came here, I had a magazine that only made fun of Vanity Fair. And, but in the long run, given the way my life is now, Vanity Fair is the perfect magazine for me.
And maybe one day the New Yorker.
No interest now.
Okay, at the end, Vanity Fair won 8 National Magazines Awards, and including 2 for a magazine with more than 1 million in circulation. And you and your writers have, and photographers has won numerous. What does it mean to win a prize?
These are not like the Oscars. They're very nice, small industry awards, and I think that it really doesn't have that big. You don't sell one extra copy from these things. You don't sell one extra page of advertising. It's nice for the writers or for the photographers. In this market, and it's a very tough business now. It's much tougher than when I started out in it. And I've been an editor in total of being an editor-in-chief for 27 years now. And it's tougher now, just as gratifying. But the greatest award is to sort of stay in business at the end of every single year.
What would you like to say to the people now tonight who get the awards in Stockholm?
It's for the person themselves, and it's not going to elevate people to. There's very few awards. I mean, the Nobels, the Pulitzers, and maybe the Oscars.
You have
are
to
like,
be a little bit more positive.
Okay.
Otherwise, they feel totally depressed when they walk out of that with the Best Excellence Journalism Award. They feel totally down. Let me ask you again, okay? Okay, let's start it all over again. What would you like to say to the people who gets the award in Stockholm?
Well, these are great awards and indicative of great journalism. And so I congratulate them in a huge way. And also, great journalism is a very vital part of our culture, both our social culture and our political culture. So, to me, journalism is one of the great safeguards between, order and chaos. Better? Yeah.